everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today on Mender Masterpiece, we are tackling Dandadan Season 1.
We should check and see if it's really there or not. No way, is it really gone? What's it look like? Show me!
What are you, stupid? I'm not showing you!
If nothing's there, what's the harm?
It's not about if anything's there or not!
And I want you to go ahead and pause for a second. Imagine you're me. It's late at Thursday night. You're playing too much of that drum arcade game. On your drive, as you're driving through the futuristic future funk neon lights, you're encountered with aliens, and they want you. You want to know why? Because you're peak physical form because of that arcade game, and a workout regimen would never work for you anyways. And they want you to revitalize their failing species with a little taste of you. And so when I found this amazingly relatable series, I just had to review it. So first off, we're going to bring it into 5 categories for you here today. We've got the beginning category, which is out of 3 points. We've got the characters category, which is broken up to main characters, side characters, and of course antagonists. It's out of 6 points. We have the story section, which is out of 4 points. We have the world building section, which is out of 4 points. And then we have the ending section, which is out of 3 points. And that's a grand total of 20. And if you are wondering why I do out of 20, because... And without further ado, let's get on into the beginning. And as I told you, extremely relatable for probably everybody in the audience. But it starts off with the Turbo Granny arc beginning, little mini series, whatever you want to call it, right? It's about the first 3 episodes. And overall, I think this is a great way to start any show, with kind of like a shocking thing that happens at the very beginning. And then everybody's like, whoa, she said she wanted my balls. And also, Momo's getting, I mean, it's pretty much like a, you know, it's one of those scenes. If I had a nickel for every time that an anime started out with one of those scenes, I would have like a small jar, which, you know, in the grand scheme of things isn't a lot, but it's kind of strange that it's happened so many times on a first episode, right? Anyways, I love the way that the story starts out, right? You got Okarun, and he believes in aliens. Why? Because he's lonely, and I will say the first episode in of itself is very good at setting up everything and doing so in an interesting way. Specifically, the whole point of the first episode is you have Okarun who's into aliens, or Kin Takakura, the forbidden word, he who shall not be named. You have him into aliens, and of course Momo is into ghosts, and they don't believe the other one for an interesting reason.
If aliens are real, but I believe ghosts are.
There's no such thing as ghosts!
What kind of jerk goes and laughs at a girl when she's trying to relate to him?
You shouldn't have mocked the occult!
And then from there, you kind of have like a fun battle shonen where the romance elements are actually at the forefront, which I think may be a first to actually having like a good romance, because typically shonen, they're not known for their romance because typically it's terrible. And also, like, the main female character or love interest usually is just kind of relegated to the sidelines. And I was very happy that in Dandadan's case, that's not really what's going on with Momo. She's actually the main focal point of the series. And I would say primary main character. You could also say they're dual main characters. Either way, it works great. So overall, I think the beginning is wonderful. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I would give it a 3 out of 3 full points there. But anyways, we have the character section. Let's go ahead and start out with the main characters. And of course we have 2 here, right? We have Momo, and she is a female main character, and she's good. This is pretty amazing for the shonen series. I'm not gonna lie, we've low-key had a terrible reputation the past few years. All female characters for some reason just turn into Sakura at some point or another in the series, and they just don't do anything. And then sometimes they're important, and heaven forbid we ever have like a good main female character in a shonen series. So it's great that Momo finally broke that mold. She's both strong and she's really smart, which is great because like a lot of times what you have problems with, especially with like a female lead, is they'll give them a really strong power at the start or something like that, or maybe later, but the character like never gets to show it off because they're relegated to cannon fodder for like the main big bad of the series or whatever. But it's great because Momo actually gets time to show off, one, her abilities, and two, how intelligent she is. Now granted, does she talk a lot? Maybe sometimes a little bit too much? Definitely. But who can really blame her when there's like grandma ghosts who are trying to steal like balls and stuff, right? So I don't think it's that much of a problem that sometimes she's a little bit too headstrong. I think that's a good little wrinkle to throw into a character, especially that's something that typically would happen in a rom-com anyways, right? Now, I do think it is also great that she actually has agency within the story. Now, granted, you may be saying, Carter, she's the main character. Why wouldn't she have agency? You'd be surprised sometimes what's happening with series right now where the main character just keeps running into a wall over and over against like anyone, and then they have to get some sort of like new power up to be able to do anything. And whereas Momo, granted, it's also kind of the series and the way it's set up, but she can actually fight and do things at every point in the series without having to have like a coach pep talk in the corner of the freaking boxing ring every 5 seconds to be able to do something. So overall, I think she's great. She's a breath of fresh air, and I overall really enjoy her role in the story. Now we have Okarun, right? Or Kin Takakura, forbidden name, right? He's a great supporting main character. I think his animation in the fights and also the way they draw him in the manga, I think are great. I really like how he's kind of the more traditional shonen protagonist, right? He's a little bit underconfident, so he's more of a new gen shonen protagonist, and he's trying to get better with his power and grow as a person as well, right? I also really like how realistic his growth is. It's not just like he gets a new form or anything like that, or maybe he like unlocks some hidden power within him that he's always had. It's very manageable things like strength training. He has to do strength training because quite literally he will just get blasted otherwise, right? And so I kind of like the more realistic approach they took with him and getting stronger with his power. It's not so much of him getting stronger as him getting more acclimated to it, which I kind of like. I like that idea. I also enjoy how he does not hog the spotlight from Momo, and Momo also doesn't hog the spotlight from Okarun at any point. You kind of get bits of both, and typically when they're on the screen together, they have a good back and forth because, you know, you still gotta add in those rom-com moments, right? That's what we're all here for. We're here for the main ship, right? And the author knows this because all of the other side characters, as we'll get into, are just kind of like non-serious triangles that they tried to make, but then you realize like it's never gonna happen, right? But overall, I really enjoyed Okarun and Momo. I think they bring a lot to the series. I like how Okarun gets depressed for his power form, which is kind of funny, and Momo just gets overpowered psychic powers that just kind of like destroy everything. It's great, and it's very fun. So next we're going to talk about these side characters here, and of course, we got to talk about Momo's grandma, right? The peak Rayleigh for the series, and she's quote-unquote old. I will say that because she's looking great for her age, that's all I'll say, but I really enjoy how the use of her strength is only when absolutely necessary, so you're not really running into like the same issues as somebody with Gojo, where they have limitless potential and then the series starts to not make sense after a certain point, so they have to seal them away. She can basically only use her strength within certain areas because she's with like the god of I want to say county, but that's not what it's called. I really do kind of like that, so it's more of she has to kind of gain power within her area through the god of the land, rather than her herself being obscenely overpowered. Now, I will say, don't let that fool you, because my god, does she massacre people with just her bat half the time. And it's very fun. I also kind of like the old school kind of bruiser tough look that they have going on with her, but then she also just like wears a pullover sweater. So overall, really enjoyed Seiko. I think she's a great side character for the series, and congrats on the aging very well. I hope, hopefully I age just as gracefully, right? As for another side character, we have Ira. She's what I was talking about earlier with like kind of the unserious love interest. It's really her and Gigi, and they kind of do the opposite for each character, right? So Ira is the unserious love interest for Okarun. I really enjoy how she's just never a romantic threat. She's so fun. The bar is in hell for her, right? Because it's so obvious how big both Momo and Okarun are crushing on each other, and Ira half the time is just like left to the side just to like cry in the corner bleachers. Not even in the like ballpark. She's not even in the ballpark. She's outside the ballpark buying tickets. That's how tragic it is for Ira. And also for Gigi as well, but we'll get to him later. I really like how she can keep up with the main group in terms of strength. I thoroughly enjoy her acrobat Silky powers. Kind of makes her have a unique identity where it's not just like all the girls get psychic powers, right? She actually got a paranormal thing, mostly like Okarun. I very much enjoy the delusions of grandeur, where she thinks she's the savior of the world, I guess, with the golden ball that she's going to purge all of the evil, and Momo is evil because it's great. I love it. Now, I will say I do also enjoy how it kind of mellows out after a bit. It's not like she's doing the same spiel every single time. I don't have to hear the same 5-minute long speech about why Momo is the Antichrist and we should all hate her and she's the reason that the ghosts are coming to kill us all. I enjoy that, right? Next, we're going to talk about Gigi. I think he is a funny second interest for Momo, just because in the sense that, like, he's brain rot the character. I like how Ira is kind of a true friend to Momo in the sense of, like, Gigi is a really good friend to Okarun as well, right? So while they are in kind of like a love triangle, it's not a thing of the two characters hate each other. It's like it's an actual fully functional triangle. It's just one part is delusional, thinking that they have a chance, right? And so I thoroughly enjoy that aspect. I think he's great setup for Evil Eye, but in the first season, you really don't get to know that much about Gigi, other than he's losing sleep and he is brain rot the character. Now, I am going to give these side characters a 1.5 out of 2. This is not for anything that they did within the story. It's just that they didn't do enough. So they didn't do anything bad. They just weren't present enough. And that's also kind of a runtime issue with the series, which I'll get into a little bit later. But next we're going to go on into the antagonist section. We kind of have like a monster of the week thing going on here. But first we'll talk about Turbo Granny. I think she's a great start for the series and a wonderful disarming hook, because it's a grandma who immediately starts talking about, "I'll let you suckle on my teats, boy, if you let me gobble your dong." And I thought about that for a second. I also think the Fortune Cat form is hilarious. I like that she's sticking around with the crew, and I hope we get a lot of character development into her as well. But I also kind of understand if we don't, just because she's a ghost and she's kind of already lived her life. Or, well, I get not yokai, right? Ghost. I did like the little bit where the reason that she haunts that area and goes after Min's genitalia is because she was there for, like, assaulted women and victims of kind of like assault, right? And so she goes after the man because, obviously. And I thoroughly enjoyed that to her character. I hope there's more, but I also kind of understand if there's not, because it's not really like she's going to change a whole lot after she's already dead, right? But great time with Turbo Granny, always a vibe. Now, we have the kind of monsters of the week. My personal favorite, I really like the Serponians. I just think they look funny, right? They look to me, and I don't know if anybody else thought this, because they tear off the skin, but like, take that out of your image for a second. You know, like those weird mascots that just have like a dome for a head and then they take it off and it's just like a giant shoulder open area? That's what I thought, and so I thought it was funny that they looked like hollow pills that you punch. I feel like it would be satisfying to like pop one of them. You kind of get what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying? Anyways, I really like all of them. Kind of like Serponians, Nessie, Acrobat Silky. You could also throw Mr. Mantis in there, but he's kind of a little bit different because he like joins and is nice afterwards. I really liked his, what are they called? Mantis Shrimp? That was super cool. I really liked that. Well, I do think all of these are good for shock value. I do think that they don't add that much other than just being an obstacle. And I'm going to get a little bit into Acrobat Silky here. She kind of falls into the issue of a Demon Slayer villain to me, where you only really get the backstory after she's already fading away and dying. So it doesn't really create much tension or conflict within, like, kind of rooting for a villain and rooting for a hero while they're fighting. It's only pity after they've already basically died, which is a fine point, but it never really elevates the story in a way that I find super satisfying, and so I'm not a huge fan of it. Now, granted, is Acrobat Silky a really upsetting backstory? Yes, it was actually tragic. It teared me up too. I really liked that episode, but I don't think that the Acrobat Silky, Nessie, or Serponians, or any of the other villains of the week that I'm really missing here, I don't think that they pull their weight to make the story better. I think they fill a function, and they do great for shock value. That's all they do. I think you really need to fix this issue, because Turbo Granny can't really be a centralizing antagonist or like an arc antagonist, and the way that this story is going to need somebody to step up to that plate. And these kind of monsters of the week things, while fun, aren't going to satisfy that for the story. So after a while, it can get very repetitive and kind of boring overall. So I'm hoping that they fix that. So I would give the antagonist a 1 or 2 for that section. Now, granted, let's talk about the story, right? Amazing start. The goal being to get his balls back is certainly a unique one. I also just like how they're like almost like gold nugget, like the big gold nugget from Pokemon. Does anybody else know what I'm talking about? That's pretty much what it looks like to me. And I also really enjoyed how it's a more grounded series, allowing for the powers and the characters to really outsmart each other rather than it just being a brute force contest. Which, in my opinion, in some series, it's great, right? Like, I like One Piece's fights. I will never complain about them. But it does get a tad questionable sometimes where for a villain to work, you just need to make the main characters stupid. And I like the fact that the main characters in the squad are not stupid so much as maybe the villains are a little bit more tricky and you have to figure them out like a puzzle, right? I really enjoyed that part of the story. I like a series that is based on outsmarting opponents rather than just brute forcing all the time. This story also does something interesting. I'll get into it with the world building as well, but it kind of has a less is more going on, where the story itself, if you break it down into its parts, is extremely simple. And here I'll use the stuff. Making me blush. Anyways, I'm gonna talk about this for a little bit, and we're just gonna talk about kind of like the story overall as like a line for the first season. And now, granted, this is for the first season, and I understand like in the next one, right, season 2, it gets a little bit more complex, but it still kind of follows this basic pattern. So first off, you have a monster appears, right, and then you have like a bunch of those within the series, and then you have the in-between areas, which are just character moments. Right? And these character moments are really interesting because they don't function the same way as like a typical shonen, because the main point of this is romance. So it's very heavily into developing Okarun and Momo into kind of like an actual couple that would make sense within the story. Now, also something that I found fascinating is that typically what would happen is if you're going more battle shonen-y, you're going to need the strong characters to get development. And so that's typically where these character moments would go. But what happens in modern shonen, and even in like older shonen like One Piece or like Naruto or Bleach, right? They have so much world building that they have to do that this like gets taken up so that you only have like this much time for character moments. And it chokes the goddamn characters to high heaven. And so I really like how in Dandadan's case, because they're trying to focus on romance first between Momo and Okarun, that they don't care about the world building aspect as much because the world itself is such a simple one to understand. There are ghosts and there are aliens. There is not a lot else going on here. And so it allows for kind of a lot of it to be filled in just by the audience's own knowledge. And then you have a lot more time for character moments, not only for the romance aspect between Okarun and Momo, but also for building up your side characters into interesting, fully fledged, living, breathing characters, which I think this series does amazingly well and is by far a standout in that category, especially right now in anime, where it feels like all you're trying to do is make a really interesting premise and like a half-baked main character and also make the world interesting. And so the characters, in my opinion, right now with anime and manga storytelling are suffering a lot right now, basically to make room for the world building. And so I really like Dandadan's case of understanding a world that's still interesting, but extremely simple to the point where they can take that time onto their characters and not have to worry about the story collapsing as a result. So I really enjoyed kind of the less is more storytelling going on within Dandadan. I think the balances between character interactions and battles work very well for the series, and overall I never really had an issue with kind of the pacing of the season as well. I also, this is completely a side tangent, but this is probably my favorite part of Dandadan, is that the sci-fi and pop culture references are hilarious and they immediately make sense to you when they happen. Probably one of my favorite ones is the UFO, I mean UAP. The UAP abducting a cow, which is so perfect. And this isn't really like a pop culture thing so much as it is like, to me, a sci-fi trope. And so I really liked that they were actually just doing that pretty much all of the monsters are things that I know, and so I can kind of relate to it in that way. And I very much enjoy how engaging it is because of that, because I know what Nessie is. I know what the Loch Ness Monster is. So it's fun to see kind of like an artist's interpretation on it, and it's still being interesting to watch even though I know what it is. So I overall really enjoyed Dandadan. I'm very excited to see what it does from here, so I will give the story section an amazing 4/4, especially with the Evil Eye stuff coming up on the second season. Now, of course, we got world building next, and like I said, all the references to the aliens and ghost stories over the ages are very engaging to the people that know them. I think this thing is incredibly important for the world building, as it is always something that you know. And so, like I said earlier, it's building time for those character moments, because you don't need to be explained what the Loch Ness Monster is. You don't need to be explained what a UFO is, right? You can kind of just accept that and understand. Now, granted, does the series kind of have fun with its explanations and like what certain things are going on? Yeah, I think it's fun how they kind of tie into each other and kind of make it like a realistic thing. But at the same time, I think it's a great tactic for actually building space within your story and not letting up on the gas on the storytelling aspect either. Something that I thought was also interesting within the world building is how the psychic kind of alien-y powers and the paranormal ghost powers are connected and they intermingle with each other. And so I thought that was interesting. So it's not like two separate systems where Momo always has to fight the aliens and Okarun always has to fight the ghosts. They can go against each other just as easily. And typically, from my understanding thus far, the opposite hurts them frickin' a lot, because they're not prepared for what's about to happen to them. And once again, I will mention in the world building category as well, but the less is more motto for this series is extremely effective even in its world building. I've already said why, but I do think it's worth mentioning here. The world building overall, I would say, is great so far. It does feel like it's missing that special something and needs a little bit more. As for what the special something is, I believe that would be either a connection of how the world interacts specifically with like an antagonist, or maybe just something to throw in to make it uniquely Dandadan's. Because while the author is doing great at kind of making these sci-fi tropes and like cryptos and aliens and ghost stories all their own, it does kind of lack something that's uniquely Dandadan right now. Whereas I think a lot of other stories that make up their own stuff don't have to struggle with that as much because they're already building an identity. Now, granted, that does not mean Dandadan does not have its own story identity. I think it has an incredibly pinpointed one at that. But I do think it needs to start building something uniquely its own for it to get that next bump for perfect world building encapsulation. But overall, I would still give it a 3.5 out of 4. I think this story is amazing with how well it executes the simple stuff, and it doesn't miss the whole time. So I overall like that. I just think it's missing a little bit of special sauce, you know? It throw in some Cajun seasoning and make it go a little wild. As for the ending category, now this may be a little bit unfair, but I do think it needs to be said. I understand that it's just the anime's cutoff for season 1, but that's kind of what I'm going off for here. And it is legendarily awkward. Like, I don't think anybody can understate how weird of a cutoff it is, especially because I know they were doing like that whole second installment thing that's really popular right now, where they already have most of the second season like done, but they don't want to release it in 24 episodes for whatever reason. And so then they delay it and make it like a season 2 or a part 2, when it really should have just been 24 episodes to make it a more holistic experience. And so I do think it gets a point off for that. But as they head off with their new compatriot, Gigi, they must do so without the safety net of Momo's grandma around, and are about to come into contact with an evil force far beyond what either of them could imagine. That, and it's the strangest modern family. That being said, I enjoyed Dandadan so much more than I thought I ever would. And I think the first season is amazing, specifically with keeping the pacing up, making the characters interesting, and really building time to delve deeper and make its characters one of a kind. And I can truly appreciate that. And so with that being said, I will give the ending a 2 out of 3 for that. Now, bonus point alert, female main character in a shonen series, and it's an extremely rare combination, and I very much appreciate it as well. I think Dandadan is going to be something special, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here. And so, with that being said, that gives us the final score of an 18 out of 20. So, what'd you think? Was I right on the money? Was I a little bit off? Would you have done anything differently? Did you get cursed by ghosts instead of abducted by aliens like me? Tell me in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.